Today on The Balanced Voice, we welcome a woman who blew our entire team away by her strength and humble forgiveness. Kim Case's trajectory of her life was tremendously changed when she was abducted and abused by 4 unknown men very early in her life.
All 4 were finally apprehended and prosecuted, and after about 5 years in the criminal justice system, finding myself with some sort of peace that they are behind bars. And now I find myself, as you've described, in this new reality. One of the offenders is receiving parole, and it's due to a technicality in the system. And I think most importantly for me is I want to give him the opportunity to understand that he's been forgiven by me, so that he can then choose to do with that what he will for the rest of his life. If we're going to be living this life parallel together with him out, I want to know that I have offered that, and that then I can stand in that place of knowing that I have risen above all of that in the way of offering hope to him to make choices that would give him some sort of a life.
Kim is an ambassador for survivors of traumatic experiences, a resounding speaker, and a reminder of hope within this broken world. With the realization of the immense blessing it is to live to tell the tale, she has dedicated her life to supporting other victims in similar situations to her own. Renya's conversation with Kim may be disturbing to a younger audience, so viewer discretion is advised. Without further ado, here's your host, Renya Mancarios. Welcome to the Balanced Voice podcast. We are so thrilled to have with us today Kim Case, who joins us from Kansas City. Kim, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Well, Kim, your story came to me from a dear Houston friend, Jerry Duddleson Moore. And I remember sitting with Jerry over breakfast, and she's telling me about you, and I had goosebumps, like deep through my arms, through my legs. Your story is one that I think so many women can relate to. Every woman is fearful of. And now you're about to go on a journey that is unimaginable. So let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Talk to us about just your background, your life before the incident took place that we'll talk about in a minute.
Absolutely. At that stage in life, at the age of 19, everything is in front of you. All your hopes and dreams are laid out there, and the road is paved for wonderful and beautiful things. And unfortunately, at that time, the road was not paved as beautifully for 4 strangers from a rural part of southern Missouri. And due to their activities and their criminal activity, they were involved in the criminal justice system and had decided to party it up and have fun before one of them went back to prison on some felony charges. So on a June afternoon, they drove from southern Missouri up to Kansas City. And we're hanging out around the city, drinking, partying, doing drugs. And after working an evening shift at a restaurant, my path intersected with theirs at another restaurant. They followed me home, unbeknownst to me. It was early in the morning hours at that point of the next day. And when I got out of my car, one of them emerged from their car and grabbed me, kidnapped me.
Reading about your story, you're 19 years old. You were thinking of becoming a flight attendant?
Yes.
Okay. So you had, life like every 19-year-old, plans and aspirations. You talk about pulling into your house thinking that maybe a friend, one of your friends had followed you for whatever reason. You find yourself being essentially abducted by these 4 men. I mean, what happens? And, that thought, I think you had written, you don't know, they're taking me somewhere else.
Yes.
Am I going to survive this? I mean, what is that feeling like?
Well, as a woman, we're taught how to protect ourselves and be aware and all of those things as if these moments are somehow our fault or that we've contributed. And the focus goes away from those actually perpetrating the crime. Yeah. So when they grabbed me, it was that instant thought of hearing at some point in my life that, if they take you from one place to another, if someone grabs you, and then you're surely going to die. So instantly, I knew that was going to be the end result. And, just thinking at that moment, what can I do every second to continue to survive? Because there were 4 men, it was this very complex gang type, atmosphere. And so I knew very quickly that it was going to be a lethal situation. It was very, dangerous. And I had to really just try to figure out how to make it through the next minute.
We probably grew up in sort of the same generation, and that was a very common sort of Oprah Winfrey special, talking to women about try to get out of a situation, never go from one place to the other. But when you think you're 19 and you're in a car with 4 people, I mean, there's very little you can do. I mean, what happened following, and how did you ultimately get out?
Yeah, I was able to escape, 15 hours later. They did take me in the car and left the city where I lived. I tried to jump out. I tried to do those things that you would assume would be a way out, but they handcuffed me. They had planned this, and they had all of the pieces and parts to perpetrate this. And in the car, they began to sexually assault me right away. And I think that they were wanting to assert their will on me and let me know that they were in charge. And so they drove, through the city and into the countryside, and eventually stopped on a country road. And it's interesting. I could see and hear cars driving by during this incident, knowing that people were probably going to work or taking their kids to school, living their everyday life. And just knowing that I was held, and the terror that's involved with that, the unknown, and seeing the escalation of the violence and of the sexual assaults, just knowing there's probably no way out, puts you in a place of reflection and drive that are so intertwined. It's hard to know which second that you're experiencing, the drive to survive, the moment to handle the abuses that are happening to you, and still keep some sort of a clear head, all the while being 19, just a young girl.
So you're on the field, you have 4 men, they're sexually assaulting you, you have people driving by, there's very little you can do. You find the will to survive that. How did you eventually get away from them?
Mm-hmm. Well, they had me handcuffed for most of the time, which, left me feeling really hopeless.
It's like you can't even imagine.
It's everyone's worst nightmare for themselves, that their family, their children, their sisters, brothers, all the things. And I knew I was in the middle of it. Eventually, 2 of the offenders left. They hitchhiked down the highway trying to get back to the community they lived in. The driver of the vehicle left us pretty early on as well. He also hitchhiked down to the community he lived in. I learned later that he was leaving to pick up his wife from work.
Wow.
And that he was going to go to work himself also. And so I was left with one offender. He was also 19. I didn't know that at the time. We didn't have really any communication or conversation, but I was being held in a barn at that point. They had taken me from the area originally where the creek was and the bridge where I had been handcuffed, and took me to this barn and up into a hayloft. And he eventually just kind of fell into a deep sleep, maybe passing out is what we might call it. They had been drinking and doing drugs. And, Ronnie, I just realized that the handcuff was loose, and I was handcuffed to him, but I thought, this is my moment. And so I began to pull and twist and turn on that handcuff.
We talk about I think it's every woman's worst nightmare, and you tasted and went through it. I'm reading your quote. As the sun came up on June 6, 1990, and I forced my swollen eyes open, I could taste my own blood. I lay violated, bound, and beaten, and I wondered if this would be the day they killed me. But you escaped that.
I did.
And you've gone on to live a life of healing and restoration. But you're at the point now where you're about to do something. I don't have the words for what you're about to do. You've made a decision, and you're allowing people to follow this journey, and it's so selfless of you and so giving of you.
Thank you.
But you've made a decision to do something that is pretty unique. Tell us what you're about to do.
Well, I found myself in a new place in this journey. Honestly, I thought that after escaping, physically pulling my hand out and jumping out of the hayloft, running to help, going through the criminal justice system, all 4 were finally apprehended and prosecuted. And, after about 5 years in the criminal justice system, finding myself with some sort of peace that they are behind bars, and began my journey of healing and restoration as you described, working in the criminal justice system, trying to close gaps that existed for victims, righting wrongs, changing laws, serving, helping, meeting people where they are, because I still had my voice, and so many people have lost theirs, either because they were murdered, because, they just didn't have the support and the strength, or they just weren't able to find, their voice again. And I knew there was a different story meant for my life. I knew that God had an original story. And so I was just trying to align back to that. And now I find myself, as you've described, in this new reality. One of the offenders is receiving parole, and it's due to a technicality in the system. And I've realized that there is a need to understand who he was at the time, and who he's become during this long stint in prison.
He's been in prison how long?
Nearly 32 years.
Okay.
Just half of the time that he was
supposed to
given. And they didn't even charge him with all of the assaults, because at the time they thought, oh, there's so many charges as it is, so many of the sexual assault charges, and that, there's probably enough, is basically what they said. And then here I find myself with him being released. And I really want to know, I want to understand. And I think most importantly for me is I want to give him the opportunity to understand that he's been forgiven by me, so that he can then choose to do with that what he will for the rest of his life. If we're going to be living this life parallel together with him out, I want to know that I have offered that, and that then I can stand in that place of knowing that I have risen above all of that in the way of offering hope to him to make choices that would give him some sort of a life. I'm not sure how it's going to go down, if it will go that way, if it'll be as easy as what it is in my mind. But, the concept of restorative justice is one arm of looking at justice reform. And I feel like we have got to begin digging into alternatives for accountability, for restoration and healing, and then for hope for the future. So we can hopefully understand there's recidivism numbers go down, that there is a new drive to offer and give something back to this world, maybe if he's given a second chance.
So his name is Kenneth Thornburg.
Yes.
Have you kept in touch with Kenneth over this 30-year period?
No.
Letters or any type of conversation at all?
No, I have not. I've gone to 2 parole hearings for him. As a matter of fact, the 3 of them have had parole hearings. So I've been in that process and in that system now for years, where you go to the prison. And again, these are all choices and rights that the survivor has, the victim has to decide, but I felt confident to go in, and I wanted to have the parole board hear from me, and then also to have them hear from me. I don't stand in the room with them, or there's a partition between us so we can hear, we can't see each other. But that's the only way that I've interacted with him on 2 occasions.
We're at Crime Stoppers, we're a very tough on crime organization, but we're also one that wants to see restorative justice. We want to see rehabilitation. We hope that somebody like Kenneth has spent 3 decades in prison being poured into in some way,
Yes.
given the tools to eventually get out and contribute positively to the world. But what you're about to do in a few months is actually go sit down with him and have this healing, or seek to have a healing conversation. Do you have any idea what you're walking into? I mean, in terms of what he's going to say or what you're going to say, and what you're hoping to come out of this exchange for other people?
I really honestly don't know what to expect. And so with that, I'm trying to keep my expectations low. And I've been really supported and loved through this by amazing mentors who remind me that this is really about my process and making sure that I am feeling good and centered and healthy through it. And so I am trying to lean into that. Because for some reason my heart is I feel this sense of sorrow about the choices that these four made, and I grieve them as young boys who somehow were exposed to life in a way that forced them or encouraged them to make choices like this to hurt another human being in such a deep and impactful way. And that's just not my reality. That's not where I exist. Not that I haven't faced hardships, grew up in an alcoholic home, abusive home, witnessed domestic violence, experienced other abuses as a child. So it's not like I had this perfect situation that all of a sudden puts me in this different place than he is. No, similar lives, but the choices were different. And somehow someone has fed me and led me to understand that, I do have the choice for hope, that I do have the choice for healing. And I guess I hope that in my countenance of just standing in that place, that he will be able to see that reflected or understand that. Or
so you're almost trying to gift him with the gift that you've been given.
I guess maybe I am. Yeah.
It's an unbelievable thing. You talk about closing the circle of pain, to seek to gift him with the gift that you've been given, and to hopefully allow us to participate in that, I think is very powerful. And I hope more people across the country will replicate what you're doing. I want to go back to the 3 decades of your journey. And as a survivor, navigating the criminal justice system and recognizing gaps, legislation, what are some of the things that you've worked on and or have been surprised to learn through this process? I mean, even just hearing you say with Kenneth, for example, there were just too many charges for them to worry about convicting him on is a little shocking.
Very shocking.
We see it though all the time. What are some of the other things you were surprised to see?
Well, this, occurred in the early 90s. And honestly, the scales of justice were so out of balance because there were no rights for victims of crime in my particular state of Missouri, but also across the country and federally. So just by fact that you weren't even really recognized as a piece of this puzzle, my body was looked at as a piece of evidence, as if it were a t-shirt or a pair of tennis shoes. And that alone, was just so glaring to me, that the need to be understood and looked at for the losses that I had suffered. And so I began working with a team on legislation for our state's Crime Victims' Rights Amendment. And it's so interesting because the counselor that I connected with, that I was working with at the time, she was on several of those statewide committees and so forth. So she kind of led me into that advocacy opportunity, which was so cathartic and allowed me to give voice to not only the pain and the hurts that existed that also were kind of caused by interaction with the system, but also allowed me to see that, one person really can make some change. And if you're just willing, and it's not that I did this or did that, it's just I opened up this painful experience for people to see how it really affects a life. And then additionally, where the hurts were in the system, like if we just tweaked this and did this and wrote a policy here, it would be better. And so all of a sudden I found myself with the opportunity to engage in that change, which really was just hoping that people that came after me wouldn't have to experience some of those additional circumstances. My event happened in 3 different counties or 3 different jurisdictions. And so, each county handled it separately and differently. And each individual was looked at separately. So look at that amount of interaction with the system that I had to go through. But then I also saw the things that worked well and helped me. And I saw the things that caused more pain. Simple things like notification, getting enough time notice about a hearing so that you can ask off work and you can make sure you have transportation, support people with you. Some of those basic things.
That we're still talking about.
Yeah.
We're still talking about it. I mean, Harris County, we're still talking about those things.
Yes. It's just, it seems so basic and elementary, but it's so foundational. And so that's kind of the life work that I stepped into and found myself with this unique way of looking at those not necessarily as like things to chastise or place blame on, but opportunity. And so the goal of my heart in interacting with the legal system, from law enforcement to the courts to legislatively and state government, was always about showing opportunity for growth, because I believe that the people that get in these roles have the right mindset and heart set, and they want to do good and they want to help. And so I'm just trying to help them get back to their original, goal and desire, by identifying these areas that are open and saying, how can we close this? How can we make this better? And so it's been a wonderful journey, come along and hit a lot of barriers in the process and boulders, I've called them many times, but this has driven me to just find my way around it and make some purpose out of this horrible situation that stole so much of my identity, my life, and my hopes, so.
But what you've turned it into, Kim, I mean, we're looking at a docuseries and a podcast, and you've changed legislation. I hate the word activist, but you've become an advocate for victims. You're a public speaker. Who are you finding is attending? Are these women who've been victimized?
It's interesting. Over time, I focused on the criminal justice system to share my story, because I knew they would get it and understand. But I found myself over the years speaking and ministering to women and men through church events, women's events, just any opportunity where there needs to be a sign of hope. And the tragic side is, when I share my story, sometimes I worry that people feel somehow their own situations minimized because of the size of this experience. And so I always want to be cognizant of, the fact that pain is pain and loss is loss and suffering is suffering. And that's really the drive behind, the next steps is to, again, bring light to that, to open that up for people to share that experience, instead of just walking through it alone.
I just keep thinking, I always think about when life journey, like one's journey changes so drastically. It's easy to fall into, why me? Why did this happen? And of course, it's traumatizing. But there are people like you who turn it into a purpose that serves everybody. And then you think, my gosh, there's such, and I'm trying to use my words carefully, because I would never wish this to happen to you or anybody else. Never. But the fact that you've turned it around and gifted the world with solutions and hope and another strategy for restoration is amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
I'm just looking at some of your, a whirlwind of emotions has flooded Kim and her family as they anticipate this looming deadline. And this is the deadline of you sitting face to face with one of your assaulters. Despite this unrest, Kim has begun to see an unexpected light flickering at the end of her tunnel. And you call that restorative justice. So you're looking forward to a peaceful moment or hope that's going to be achieved through this. You've allowed people to watch you as you do that, and we're all hoping that your docuseries takes off. How can people support you in other ways or connect with you during this process?
That really means a lot, and I appreciate that, offering, because this really is something for us all.
Yeah.
The hope behind the restorative justice is that, we find ourselves in this crazy, unique time in 2022 where there's so much hurt. There's the cancel culture. There is the, everybody's fighting.
The list is endless.
Yes, right. And there's just something more. And I think being a strong person of faith, that has helped me see an example of going in and having the difficult conversations, saying the hard words, trying to bring, the two sides back together. And that is my goal with this process. Restorative restorative justice as a concept has been around for decades. Really it has a very natural beginning in a Native American type culture where righting the wrongs and seeking justice in repairing the losses and the harm that way. And there needs to be accountability, definitely, obviously, through the criminal justice system. And we want to be safe. We want people that perpetrate these kinds of crimes behind bars where they're not having access to hurting people. However, hopefully over this time, there has been, a change of heart, or at least an insight about the type of suffering that someone who's experienced those losses has gone through. And so it's my desire to just be able to open that up. And that is where I really want people to see that sometimes when we feel like we're hope lost, like completely done, that there are more steps. It's really about choosing to take those and finding your brave, seeking that out with the support and love of those that want to join, which, by the grace of God, many have that are just supporting this effort. But people are welcome to find me on social media, through my website, kimcase.org. I love to receive messages from people that are working to overcome, their pain, just so that I can give a virtual high five and say we're in this together, because unfortunately no human being experiences life without pain.
And pain, while it's so specific, it's actually not very specific. So, your story, as you said, you don't mean to minimize other people's stories. Obviously, what you went through is so unbelievably traumatizing. But I think any woman is carrying her own burden. Absolutely. And can see and learn from others who have risen above. And the more you've risen above, the greater the inspiration and the hope is for others. And I can't, imagine anything more significant beyond sort of the loss of a child or the loss of, those closest to you that one can endure. Kim, I'm curious, the tears come 30 years later. What has the healing journey been like? I mean, is it isolation in the early stages and then slowly being willing to and be embraced by the community, then slowly deciding to make yourself available to the community, or is every day different?
It's been kind of a mixture of what you just described. There's definitely been an ebb and flow to it. Fortunately, was connected with some really good counseling, very, clinical therapy in those early years, just to help me organize around not only, this victimization and the violation of such a grand, type to my physical body as a young woman, and all that left for me to overcome, but then just also the hurt of how someone could do that to another person so violently. So the counseling was really important for me to set my mind right, to tell me, put some truths in my heart about who I was, and what, again, back to that original storyline that I believe, God purposes for all of us. And my faith has been the key really to settling in on that while this happened, something good can come out of it. And if I just step into that and be willing and trust kind of that process of opening it up, then there has been great healing on that journey. And then I think also through speaking and just the opportunity to right the wrongs in the system made me feel somehow purposeful, that while this is so ugly. I mean, that's been one of the hardest things. It's just so ugly. It's ugly to talk about. It's ugly to think about. But it's unfortunately my story. And so how can I turn it and use it for something that's good? Really bringing, some message out of that horrible mess is really it.
People ask me all the time, why do you do the job you do? It's you're dealing with the most difficult issues constantly. Every day, it's the most difficult issues. And it is very ugly. It's ugly. It's awful. It's vile and vicious. It's the depravity of man.
Yes.
It's everything wrong with society. But as you shed light on it, you do conquer it. And you make it harder for it to thrive, and you create solutions, and people have to be doing that. As much as we can talk about it, somebody like you has the power to change everything. And so we thank you so much for sharing your story and your life's work with so many others. And we encourage people to follow Kim, to support the docuseries, the podcast. Her life and her journey is available to help so many, and we want to see it to reach its full potential. I keep thinking of you traveling the world as a flight attendant, and here you are traveling the world with your voice and your mission and your hope and restoration. And I hope that gives you peace on some level, because it's very powerful.
Thank you so much, Rania.
You are incredible. We'll be following you every step of the way. To all of you, thank you for tuning in to the Balanced Voice podcast. Kim, we thank you again for being with us, and we'll catch you next time. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to today's Balanced Conversation. You can find real solutions and tangible resources in our show notes at thebalancedvoicepodcast.com. To join the conversation, follow us on Instagram at The Balanced Voice Podcast and on Twitter at @BalancedVoice_. Stay up to date on Rania's work by following her at The Rania Report, and we can't wait to see you next week for another Balanced Conversation.